Morning, everyone. So we're going to talk about healthcare today because Rishi Sunak has got himself into another bit of a mess. I will remind people that at the start of the year, Rishi Sunak made 5 promises to the nation to sort things out. One of them was NHS waiting lists. And just to remind people why it's really important for them. So in terms of what voters most care about, they most care about, polls consistently show, all pollsters, no matter where you go, consistently show the cost of living and the NHS. Simple as that. Cost of living and healthcare. So it's really important. This is even amongst Conservative voters. Healthcare is incredibly important to them. So that's why he had to make some sort of promise about cutting waiting lists. And I'll just point to another poll that's just fresh off the press, so to speak. A poll that was asked people what they thought was the most British. So there were various options here, including the monarchy, including the Union flag. They call it the Union Jack. I don't like that. It is acceptable, but it's fine. The pub, the Houses of Parliament. No, what beats them all by a country mile is the NHS. The NHS is considered the most British thing by a poll of, well, British people. So incredibly important. Only it's gone a little bit wrong this week. So first of all, part of Rishi Sunak's promise for cutting waiting lists, and I keep arguing cutting waiting lists surely isn't the key thing. It's cutting waiting times that matters. But that was part of his promise as well. He said that by the end of April this year, 2023, by the end of April, nobody would be waiting more than 18 months for hospital treatment. Now, you may think to yourself, well, even 18 months is quite a long time. That's a pretty low bar. But they have failed to meet even that low bar. So the announcement this week has had to be, sorry, no, we haven't met our target. Surprise, surprise. Then Rishi Sunak thought, right, after the really terrible local election results, I'm going to have to take the initiative. I'm going to have to go out and do a thing and get people back on board. So he decided to go to Southampton, I think it was, to announce some new healthcare policies to distract us from the fact they're failing on the old ones. And he straight away got into trouble because he took a private helicopter for a journey that would have taken about an hour on the train. But his argument was, well, I had meetings in the afternoon. I've got to get to places really quickly. And I think, okay. Sometimes, yes, a minister, particularly the prime minister, may have to do a visit somewhere and then get back quickly. Okay, fine. So what did he go to Southampton for? Was it on a fact-finding mission? No. He wouldn't even talk to the journalists who were there. He was in and out. What did he go for? He went to a pharmacy just so that he could announce his plan to put more pharmacies out of business. And you think, well, he could have done that in London, couldn't he? He could have announced it from Downing Street. So it wasn't even an essential trip. He just took a private helicopter for a photo opportunity that he could easily have done in London. And then what was his announcement? So let's go through where we are. When Labour were in government, you had the right to a GP appointment within 48 hours. You ring up, within 2 days, you have your appointment. You probably have it on the same day, but there was an absolute guarantee that you would get it within 2 days. In fact, Tony Blair got into trouble for it because there were some people who needed non-urgent appointments with their GP, but they had to make them a week in advance, and the GPs weren't letting them. So Tony Blair got it in the neck when he attended a BBC Question Time, and then they had to sort of try and improve that as well. But 2 days. The government last year, so you can't even get a GP appointment. I can't get a GP appointment for weeks. And so the government said, well, we are going to have an aim to make sure you can definitely get a GP appointment within 2 weeks. It's like, hang on. With Labour, it was in 2 days. So you're saying we're going to have a GP appointment within 2 weeks? No. We're going to aim to make sure you get an appointment within 2 weeks. So they haven't even achieved that, and they had no plan to achieve it. So it's not happened. But so Sunak is now having to distract from all these failures because every time they have an aim for healthcare, they fail their own target. So Sunak's latest plan is he's there thinking, right, there's people ringing up their GP, they can't get through. When they can get through, they just get told that there's no appointments available. Oh, this isn't very good. We need to do something about this. So his plan now is when you ring the GP, and I don't know when this will happen, when you ring the GP, you will get through to an appropriate service, right? An appropriate service. That service appears to be go to the pharmacist. So Rishi Sunak's plan is if you can't get a GP appointment, you go to the pharmacist. Now, let's think this through. Let's think the practicalities of this through. So you go to the pharmacy, right, to get unqualified advice. I mean, if they want some advice on non-prescription drugs, okay. But Sunak's plan is that the pharmacist may give you prescription drugs like antibiotics. Now, pharmacists have a lot of concerns about that, as you can well imagine. We already overuse antibiotics as it is. But nonetheless, Sunak wants the pharmacist to offer unqualified advice. But more than that, so imagine lots of people having to go to the pharmacist now because they can't get a GP appointment. So now there's a queue at the pharmacy. You'll go to the pharmacy, you just want some eye drops, right? Or something like that, or some like antihistamines. So you go there, you're stuck in this queue. A lot of the people in that queue are there for not just unqualified advice, but free advice. The pharmacist isn't going to charge them for their unqualified advice. So that pharmacist now has a queue of people who aren't even customers. Pharmacists are already struggling. Their business model is already struggling thanks to the Tories. And some have already gone out of business. So now his plan is to make pharmacists get in a load of customers who aren't even paying to get unqualified advice, which could actually be quite dangerous. But that wasn't the end of it. It got even better, even better. But before I go to the next bit, let's catch up with a few comments here. Let's have a look. We can now buy contraception from chemists thanks to Rishi. Oh, no, you could get that anyway. No, well, maybe. But the idea of pharmacists being able to say, oh, yes, have some antibiotics. I mean, I know some GPs are a bit too quick to do that, but at least they're qualified to do that. Whereas pharmacists aren't stupid, of course. They're highly trained in themselves, but they're not trained to diagnose or prescribe. And what Rishi Sunak is saying is, no, let them do that. One of the reasons I joined the Labour Party, I was sick of the mess the Tories are making the NHS, hold them responsible for the death last year of my wife as an ambulance couldn't get out. Well, I hold David Cameron responsible for the death of like a very, very close friend of mine some years ago. Because what David Cameron did is he changed. So what would have happened in the past? So let's say you've got a problem. You go and see a GP. At the time, you could still see a GP. And they say, oh, right, sounds like it might be this. We'll send you for a test at the hospital. Now, in theory, can still happen. Good doctors will still do that. But David Cameron changed the system so that GPs have a financial incentive not to send you for tests or hospital treatment. So there's a financial incentive for the GP to basically tell you to go away and walk it off. And that's exactly what happened to a friend of mine. He had redness and an uncomfortable feeling in his thigh. He fainted, just randomly fainted. Now, someone says that to me, I'm instantly thinking that could be a clot, that could be thrombosis. You need to get yourselves to A&E. Now, I didn't know he had this. He hadn't told me. What had happened, I only found out later, is he'd gone to the GP. The GP, instead of going, you need to go to A&E, instead said, oh, well, it might be all right. Walk it off for a bit and come back to me in 2 weeks. A week later, he was dead because it was a clot. It had broken free. It got caught in his lung and they couldn't save him. And that was purely because this doctor did not tell them to go to the hospital. Now, granted, a good GP, even now, will still do that. But the reason that GP didn't do is because the way Cameron had reorganised NHS budgets is that GP surgery would have effectively paid for the test. It would have come out their budget. So there's a financial incentive for them to think, well, maybe it'll sort itself out, which is absolutely appalling. So I absolutely hold the Tories responsible for something that affected me very closely, but also just in general, even if it hadn't affected me like that, you can just see it in the data. You can see the time it takes for people to get treatment. And the problem is, like, when someone needs treatment, it means their body isn't going to deal with it themselves. So they're going to deteriorate the longer that treatment takes place. So the longer it takes you to get treatment, the less chance you have of making a full recovery, as well as it just taking longer to recover. And that's a moral problem as well as an economic problem, because it means people are not being able to go back to work, or if they are able to go back to work, they're not at full productivity because they're ill. And sometimes even when you get your treatment, if you get it very late, it may be too late, as I say, for a full recovery or a recovery at all. And this is the problem when you do not have the capacity. See, what the Tories did is they reduced the capacity so that it could cope in summer. It was like, oh, we'll let things back up in winter, and then in summer they can sort of sort themselves out. That was their plan. But it means that at the busy times of year, people are not getting the treatment that they should as quickly as they should. And that has an economic as well as a moral impact. But now it's got to the point where even in summer they can't cope. The NHS winter crisis last year began in September. That's still summer. So the NHS winter crisis doesn't even wait for winter anymore. It was summer last year. It might be summer again this year. But anyway, the other thing is budget controller saying there, medicines can have adverse effects when used in conjunction with other medicines. It can also affect how some people adversely due to pre-existing conditions. Surely pharmacists will need medical rec. Well, the thing is, they're not going to get it. This plan is Rishi Sunak saying, we've got a log jam at GP surgeries, so let's just move it somewhere else. Let's move the problem somewhere else. Make it the problem for pharmacists. That's what it's about. Sunak doesn't care about this. He just pays 250 quid to see a GP when he needs to. But even that is not the full extent of their plan, because it gets even better. Because you think to yourself, well, pharmacists aren't qualified. People should see a doctor. Not a problem. Rishi Sunak's got you covered. Because now the plan is that 1 in 3 doctors are not going to go to medical school. They're just going to leave school and they're going to get a job as a doctor. Not quite true. But they're going to do on-the-job training. That is the plan. And they're trying to build this as, oh, a university isn't for everyone. It's like, no, but let's think about the situation. To train a doctor, they go to medical school for 5 years. Now, some of it obviously includes a bit of clinical experience, but 5 years at university. Then you do a year in hospital. You do half a year as a physician and half a year as a surgeon, I think, or in surgery, something like that, don't you? So you've basically got 6 years to fully qualify of full-on medical training. So this plan is that you leave school and you just get a job in the NHS as a training doctor, and you learn on the job. And you straight away think to yourself, well, hang on a minute, okay. So this means one of two things. Either it means it's going to take you 2 or 3 times as long to fully train as a doctor, in which case we're waiting a lot longer to get these doctors, or it means you're not going to learn as much as someone who goes down the university route. Because there are things you can learn on the job. Like, for example, when I became a teacher, I did a 1-year PGCE at university. There are other routes you can now take. You can do that on the job. You can take 2 years to go direct to schools and learn on the job. That works because you've already done your university degree in the subjects for which you need to be an expert. So you've already done your academic study, and you can absolutely learn on the job in teaching if you take extra time over it. That's not a problem. You can do that. For a doctor, that's ridiculous because it's full on 5 years at university, a year junior house officer position. And even then, bear in mind, it's not over because doctors carry on studying. And it doesn't matter whether you want to go down the hospital route to become, like a registrar, then a consultant, or if you want to become a GP. There's hours of study that all doctors have to do. Hours of study every week, even experienced doctors. So the whole system it makes no sense to anyone who understands the slightest bit about how medicine works. But that is the thing. Rishi Sunak wants people to go to a hospital. Oh, the doctor will see you now. You go in, you go, you're a bit young to be a doctor, aren't you? Yeah, I just finished my GCSEs. I'm learning on the job, don't worry. Because apart from anything else, learning on the job, all that means really is you're just going to hang around an actual qualified doctor, doesn't it? And do almost nothing. Do you mind if this trainee doctor takes out your kidney? Yes, I do mind. Absolute nonsense. At the Barber of Seville, yes. Absolute nonsense. This is where they're going now. This is the consequence of the fact that they refuse to fund healthcare, and for two reasons. First of all, they want the NHS to collapse. They want it to be taken over by hugely expensive American-style private healthcare. And they'll keep saying things like, American healthcare, best in the world. No, it's not. It's the worst. Of all developed countries, it is the worst in the world. The best is arguably Italy at the moment. Used to be the NHS. The NHS used to be the best healthcare system of all nations, but certainly of all advanced nations. Now it's like, what is it, 10th or something? Anyway, catch up with a few more little comments. Also insane on the level of responsibility. The worst a teacher can cop in a classroom is order of magnitude less than a doctor dealing with potential life and death. Yeah, I don't even know how it's supposed to work. See, here's the other thing is where is the liability? Because the liability won't be with the government. So I suspect it won't even get off the ground, because even though it's supposed to quite soon, because who's going to accept the liability for that? You know, someone is going to have to accept the legal liability for that. And as it is, hospitals get sued all the time anyway for potential negligence. And even if they haven't been negligent, they still have to fight the case legally. So you need a lot of, basically doctors need insurance. Who's going to insure someone who's, I say GCSEs, I was taking the piss. It'll be you'll do your A-levels presumably still first. At least I assume so. But who's going to insure someone who's just finished their A-levels? And I'm not suggesting they'll go straight in and be, but what are they going to do? What are they going to do of value while they're learning on the job? What are they going to do? You'd think his bragging about his parents being a GP and a pharmacist, he'd have a basic understanding of how the system works. I'm quite sure I'm sure he knows exactly how the system works. I am quite sure of that. He doesn't care. He's not interested. What he's interested in is the fact that the overwhelming number of voters consider healthcare to be a top voting issue, not just an important issue, but one that will influence the way they spend their vote in the general election next year. He knows that. He knows he can't persuade them that healthcare is fine. So all he's interested in doing is trying to persuade people that he is improving it. He knows he can't persuade people that the NHS is in a better state than it was under Labour. He knows that. He knows he can't claim that the Conservatives have improved the NHS. He knows that. So what he has to do is say, just like Boris Johnson in 2019, I am different. You know, my predecessors failed, but I am going to succeed where they failed. That's what he has to do. And to do that, he needs to talk about all these things he's going to do, because his problems are waiting lists are too long. Why are waiting lists too long? Because we do not have the doctors and nurses to deliver the treatment. That's ultimately it. That's why the waiting list is so long. They try and blame COVID. It's not COVID. COVID made things worse, but it was really bad before COVID. And it's gotten worse since COVID has, because COVID is now there. It's still around. It's still killing people, but it is no longer impacting on how we arrange anything, including healthcare, other than the fact it's providing lots of patients. So yeah, it's go. In the Middle Ages, the barbers would perform your surgeries. The Tories are dragging us back. Yes. In fact, in naval terms, it was the ship's cook. You know, the ship's cook was also the medic. They were the doctor because they had knives. Yeah, it is, isn't it? It is absolutely dragging us back to, or even like nursing. The Royal College for Nurses are not happy either, even from the point of view of nurses doing this, because for a long time, nursing was not a graduate profession. Then it became a graduate profession. To begin with, it was like you could choose which route, and then it became, no, now all qualified nurses go through the university route. So they're now much more highly trained than they used to be in the past. All of that disappears if you do this on the job training, because it means you're not getting as much training in the same space of time, which means either it takes you a lot longer to get up to the same level, or you never get up to that level. And it's almost like creating a second-class tier of nurses and doctors. You know, and maybe that's the plan. Maybe it's you get partially qualified doctors to take care of certain things, and the advanced practitioners, the ones who go through the proper route, will probably be called advanced practitioners, and they can deal with the proper stuff. Absolute nonsense. Can't imagine the RNC are happy about being taken to court either. No, but they did actually break the law there, so that was a bit silly. I don't actually know if they did it deliberately just to, you know, just to highlight the problem, to get it in the news, or what. But all that so the law now is that when you issue a ballot for strike action, it lasts for 6 months. So the RCN tried to have a strike after that 6 months, whereas they should have just issued another ballot, really. So, you know, it's one of those things, you know, they were breaking the law there. So they should have just, and I actually don't think that's a bad law. If you have a ballot for a strike lasting because really, strike action shouldn't take 6 months to work its effect anyway. But if it is going to, then just have another ballot. But anyway, the 1700s, where the cook and barber surgeon were separated on ships. So there you go. I was right. In medieval times, they were the same thing. When I left school, you could be a nurse if you had enough O-levels. Yeah, it was the same for my mum. But they slowly changed it so that it was a full graduate position now. So they're much more highly trained now. At the time, some nurses, initially, your less experienced nurses, all they effectively did was make beds and fetch and carry bedpans. And then you had to learn to be able to carry out other things as well. Whereas now they're very qualified medics. It's to cut down on student loans. It's not. It's a plan to try and inject more staff into the system as quickly as possible, because they can't hide the fact that there are massive shortages of doctors and nurses. And what it is, it's an attempt to get some cheap labor into the healthcare system, is what it is. And to cover up their shortages, because then once they're in, they can basically say, well, this is no longer a shortage. Yes, they're not a fully qualified doctor, but they will be. But at the moment, their position is there, the position is filled. So it allows them to claim that the shortages are not as bad as they are. Weep at the carnage these Tories have caused, are like a tumour on our public services. They are on the whole society, because it's not even the damage they're doing to public services these days. That was Thatcher and Major. Margaret Thatcher and John Major were the ones that damaged public services. The current crop are far worse, because they damage society itself. You know, they have normalized the most offensive things, like, you know, this illegal migration bill going through, for example. Just the language used around it is quite appalling. And that, you know, that wouldn't have happened under the Conservatives of the 80s and 90s. That is new. I say new, in the last 10 years. Hi, Richard. Just want to say, as a farmer with stringent regulations over antibiotics use, I find the government's decision to let pharmacists prescribe antibiotics alarming. It should be, yeah, it is alarming to anyone, because, as I say, we already know that in reality, probably doctors prescribe antibiotics more freely than they should, leading to antibiotic resistance. You know, but yeah, to allow a pharmacist to do it is a madness. Is a madness, absolute madness. Can totally see the Tories blaming Netflix for something in the next year. Well, I was actually joking when I heard this announcement that Rishi Sunak was going to say that anyone trying to get through to a GP will get through to an appropriate service. I was wondering if everything else is used up, because there's no point in going through to the NHS Direct, the non-emergency NHS, because they'll just tell you to go to the GP. It's like, try and ring the GP. No, go to NHS Direct or whatever. Is it still called that now or something else? I don't know. But then so you go there and it's like, oh, you should go to the GP with that. So they obviously didn't mean that. I wondered if you end up going to an automated message saying to Netflix and chill. See if it's, because that's what, as I say, that's what the Conservatives have designed GPs to do anyway. You know, it's like IT. Have you turned it off and on again? That's what they want GPs to do. Have you tried doing nothing for a week and seeing if you heal yourself? Because that's what happens so often these days. You know, I had my, someone I know's daughter, for example, was supposed to go for she's got a serious problem, and she was supposed to go for a mammogram, right? And they went there and she'd already had all the usual stuff, like the creams and ointments and stuff like that. They'd gone through all that. They'd gone through the try doing nothing, see if it works. Oh, no, you haven't healed yourself. Well, try this cream, try that cream. Right, we need to do a scan now. She goes to the scan, right, which is not in her town. She's had to travel for it. She goes there. The doctor takes a look and goes, oh, you don't need a scan. You need this cream. And because she was a bit stupid, well, she's a bit young, really, she just went along with it. She didn't say, hang on, no, I've tried these creams. I've been sent here for a scan. I need the scan. So she waited all this time for this scan. She didn't get the scan because the system is now set up to just get rid of people. So now she still has to ask the scan. She's now going to having to wait till next month. And she's going to have to travel again. And this time she's just, you know, I've said to her, you just need to make, you get in that scan. You do not leave that room until you've had that pissing scan. But it's, you know, the system is now set up to be incredibly inefficient because the government have set it up to basically just get rid of people as easily as you can. So the only way to get treatment these days is either to have your leg actually hanging off, at which point nobody disagrees that you need treatment, or you have to demand it. You have to actually be very assertive to get anything at the moment. Move to Scotland. Well, it would be better. Or indeed Wales, because healthcare is also to a significant degree, not as much as maybe Scotland, devolved in Wales. And you can sort of tell this because nurses in Wales and Scotland get about £3,000 a year more than nurses in England, for example. I don't know what it's like in Northern Ireland. But there we go. Oh, have I missed an interesting question? Don't want to be disillusioned with style. What realistic can he do? He won't have half the economic buffer Blair had. No, indeed he won't. No, that is why at the moment, see, at the moment, Labour are in a very strange position because you'd think they'd be hyping themselves up and people are going, where's the excitement? Where's the hype for this Labour government? And Labour are deliberately toning it down because they don't want people to be too hyped because, yes, the economy is in a terrible state. But I would say this, they have two things that they can do the Conservatives can't do. First of all, they can tax wealthy corporations. And part of that just means removing tax breaks for those who don't need it. So Labour have already said they will remove tax breaks for wealthy corporations and individuals that don't need it. So that includes private schools, non-doms, oil and gas companies, and so on. The other thing is they won't be wasting quite so much on sorry, I'm scanning up for something. On nothing. Like, remember, Rishi Sunak in 2020, about £100 billion just disappeared into thin air. Literally thin air. Nothing happened with it. We didn't get anything for it. It's not that it was not wisely spent. It just disappeared. So George's super chat, I've just been reminded there. It says, can someone explain to me, please, how the Tories are not either criminal or stupid? They're sort of both. Usually, well, the reason why it's mostly not criminal is because who decides what is criminal? Parliament. Parliament tends not to make their own activities illegal. But some of it inevitably will be, but there's no investigations. But I also think they're stupid because they know they're going to lose next year's election. And they also know what they need to do in order to give themselves a chance of winning it, because it's not certain. The Conservatives, even after 13 years of ruin, could still turn it around. Absolutely. And all they have to do is, for a year, start to actually deal with things properly. Tax the wealthy. Use the money to help out people who are struggling. Address the cost of living. Like, they're talking about, oh, good news, energy bills are coming down later this year. It's like they never should have gone up. They went up like 4% in France. And even though they've got a nationalised system and they increased that level of nationalisation to do so, we could still have done it, because ultimately the reason why the energy prices went up, it wasn't the war in Ukraine. That was an excuse. It was because oil and gas companies increased their prices. So we should have just said, right, we're taking not just a bit, all of your windfall profits. They haven't actually taken any. We're taking all of your windfall profits, and we're going to, well, give them a choice. Either you charge us what is reasonable, or we'll just take your excess profits and we'll use those to offset the higher prices of the oil and gas you're selling. One or the other. But they didn't. They could have done that. They didn't do that. But anyway, so at the moment they are stupid, because what they could do is they could just behave themselves for 1 year, govern for 1 year, get in again, then they can go back to being arseholes for 5 more years. I mean, that's easy. It's cynical, it's dirty, but they could do that. But no, even that question, I'll finish off with this one, that question from Ed Davey of the Lib Dems, who got the Tories so riled up yesterday, when he was saying, why don't you stop the bonuses for water company executives? Why don't you stop their bonuses? Now, the Tories could easily do that. The Tories could say, well, you shouldn't be dumping all this sewage. Your bonuses are being stopped. They could do that, but they don't want to do that. And what would that cost them? Really? What would that cost them 1 year? Not a lot, but they won't do it because they refuse, they absolutely refuse to tax the wealthy or to stop the wealthy becoming even wealthier, even when they fail. They are just pathologically incapable of doing it. But last couple of questions, and we'll call it there. Tories think that everyone else is stupid. I mean, they're not totally wrong. People keep voting for them, but people are finally fed up. Yes, they are fed up. Absolutely fed up. I mean, people are talking about the latest polling showing, oh, all these people that are going to vote Labour, they're not voting Labour because they like Labour. They're voting because they hate the Conservatives. Like, yeah, that's like in any election. That's how most people vote. Most people do not vote for what they want. I mean, I keep saying in a particularly a first past the post democracy, it's not about voting for what you want. It's about voting for what you least oppose. And at the moment, people are least opposed to Labour, so they'll vote for Labour. But most people who vote Labour are not Labour supporters. They just don't want a Conservative government. Just like most people who vote for the Conservatives don't want a Conservative government. They just don't want a Labour government. So if we had a proper system where people could actually vote for what they wanted to, both parties would lose votes, but the Conservatives would lose power. But with that happy note, I will leave it there. Thanks for coming on, everyone. Don't forget to click the like. Don't forget to comment and subscribe. And if you want to check out the description below, there should be a link to the Patreon if you would like to join that as well. But have a good day, everyone. And until next time, and I'll see you later.